本日はシンポジウム桃太郎海の新兵からペリリュー楽園のゲルニカまで
From Momotaro Sacred Sailors to Peleliu Guernica of Paradise, how Japanese animation has portrayed war. This is the theme of our session. I am the moderator, Fujitsu. And I would like to start from explaining by the context of why we are holding this session today. As you know, this year marks the 80th year after the World War. That's why we decided to hold this symposium. The Pacific War has been portrayed in a lot of works, but in animation, there are 15 stories. And live action or manga have featured a lot, but not so much of the battlefield or the front. But this December, Peleliu is going to be released in theaters. So that's why how to portray the front of the battle and also how we express the Pacific War. This is the theme and the context of why we're holding this session with 3 panelists today. Let me welcome the panelists. First, is the original artist of Peleliu, Mr. Kazuyoshi Takeda, and also we have 2 associate professors, Sano-san and Hori-san. I would like to ask Takeda-san for self-introduction. Sure. Peleliu, Paradise in Guernica of Paradise. I did the original work. I am a comic artist, Kazuyoshi Takeda. Sano-san, over to you. I'm an associate professor at the Faculty of Culture and Information Science at Doshisha University. War and Japanese animation has been my research theme. Next is Hori-san. Hi, I'm an associate professor at the Faculty of Letters at Toyo Universities. Since I was in graduate school, I've been a fan of Momotaro Sacred Sailors. It has always been a special work for me. And I'm so happy that my passion about this work has brought me here. And with Sano-san today, we did a joint paper on this theme, and that's why I'm invited here today. Thank you so much. I would like to ask some questions about your work, Peleliu, Takeda-san. But let us first show the trailer.
君はこの島から生きて帰れると思っているのかい？え？
田丸一等兵、参りました。
仕事を頼みたいのだ。功績係という。
俺が死んだらおめえがうちの母ちゃんに手紙書くってことか？
楽園が地獄になる。
鬼畜命を打ち通せ
！1万人中わずか34人しか生き残れなかった激戦。その中で生まれたのは
生きて日本に帰ろうぜ。絶対。
はい。
伏せろ！大丈夫か？
ありがとう。
死ぬのはごめんだぜ。
僕ら約束しただろ。
死ぬわけにはいかねえな。
命はまた巡り合う儚く散る定めでも夏の果てに
みんなで生きて帰ると信じていた。
ママってお母さん。
約束を忘れない。
たまる！
よしきくん。
ペリリュー楽園のゲルニカ。
歌い継ぐ命の歌。
So yes, we just saw the trailer together, and the animation is underway at this film festival. But by this time, it was to be ready to be screened, actually, but still, the work is not finished. Well, we still have a little bit of time until December. So Takeda-san, can we talk about the original work that you made? I think you have talked about this maybe at different places, but you're not the one who experienced firsthand the war, but what made you do this work? Well, at the beginning, it was not kind of like my own volition that I thought that I have to write something or create something about war. 10 years ago, Hakusensha, the publishing house, did some MOOC book, like a special book, as an omnibus of some work, collection of work about war. And the editor approached me to join that project. And it was very strange even to me, but immediately I felt motivation that this is something that I really want to do. Peleliu was not an idea that I had at that time yet, but it was it was the 70th year after the war, and the island of Peleliu was visited by the emperor and empress, and I didn't even know about that island, Peleliu Island. And that's what I remembered very well, that I didn't know about it. And there is Masao Hiratsuka. He is an expert of the people who were sacrificed at the war. And the survivors had been interviewed by him. He did interviews with them of tens of the war survivors, and that's actually his life work. And he's helping me on this work, my work, a lot as well. So the voices of the survivors is what I heard and learned about through Hiratsuka-san. And the stories of the young soldiers changed the impression of the people that I had of the people who had went to the war. They are just like normal young people. That's the new impression that I formed after listening to their stories. So normal young people had to go to the war. And that real story is what I wanted to depict. That's how I felt. And that was the first motivation why I started creating this work. So that was the start, and then you did a full-length version of it. And it was a series. So you were very determined to make it a long series. Well, why? Well, until I was asked to join the project, until I was asked to come to join the project, I wasn't interested to do anything about the war because I knew that it was going to be a hard work. But involving myself in it, because I decided to join the project, I started to do researches, and then I became very interested, and I couldn't help. When it is about the war, you have to search information a lot about it, write about it. There are things that you cannot really find out and fully understand. Even you do a lot of research. And the people who actually went to the war, and also their family members, by expressing their voices, it could hurt them, I felt. That was what I feared about, but that could be a risk. But still, I could not hold back my motivation that I wanted to create the work. So a stronger determination than other type of work that I had in the past was required for sure. And the style of your work, very cute impression that was also expressed in the animation trailer that we just saw. That cute kind of expression of characters to depict the war, was there any challenge? Well, the challenge was only how technically you would do it, because this cute character with characters that are 3 heads high, holding weapons, that was kind of a technically difficult how to express visually. But my debut work of fighting against cancer, because this is my real personal experience, and that actually motivated me and triggered me to make a debut as a manga artist. And because like serious diseases are a very hard topic to talk about, read about, to make it easier for people to make entry to start reading it, that's why I used the 3 head height cute character. And I thought that I could take the same visual approach to make it easier to people to get into my work for this manga as well. It's actually kind of a must approach that I have to take, because it's going to be painful expressions and portrayal of like the hard topics. That's why a cute character could make it a bit mentally easier for people to engage with the content. And without that approach, because it's not like studying, like it's reading a manga. Because it is a valuable content about the war, we have to read and study about it. That's not how people approach manga. It's not like going through textbooks. It has to be an interesting, fun manga for people to read. And that's why I needed a framework, which is the cute character that I used. On the other hand, the stories of the survivors, you said that you interviewed a lot, but the character is a fiction character. Yes. But the reality and also how you designed the characters, like balancing the realness might have been a challenge. How did you approach that? So if I base it on a real person, so maybe it could have been a documentary approach, I thought, as an option. But using a fictional character to communicate or convey the fictional facts, the real facts, I had to choose between the two, which was not an easy decision. But I decided to use a fictional character. But the expert, Mr. Hiratsuka, gave me an advice. And when he does interviews, he creates a documentary of actual facts. And there are facts that he does know. But if the interviewees that he talked to need to be protected with their privacy or their dignity, with respect to them, for protection of them, there are some facts that he never writes about. Because it is a documentary, there are some pieces of information that he intentionally does not write about. But if it's a fiction, because it does not identify who it is in the real world, it's a fictional character, that maybe give more freedom to talk about, to write about those facts. That really helped me to make a decision to choose the fiction approach. So that was really a huge influential piece of advice to me from him. Normal young people going to the battlefield. You mentioned about it, and that's also a very important aspect, right? So normal people or regular people, what is the definition of regular people, you would think? And when I say regular people, I think there is always like a diversity. There are good people, there are bad people, there are serious people, and people who are not so serious. So there are different types of people. That's what normal or ordinary people are. So to express the ordinary people that are consistent of all different types of people, like fiction was a better format, I felt. So you have 11 books of the original series, and there's different stories and drama, and each of the different characters have their different lives and the life stories, and I don't think that was an easy job for you to do that creation. Each character in the story of Peleliu don't exist just to develop the stories, but each character, under the condition of wartime, how they approach lives, what their mindsets were, what action they took. To express that, I came up with each character. So to portray the different type of people, you mean?
So I just wanted to say that there's all types of people in my work. So each character is a fictional character. But if there was a war, they would probably, one person would do this, another person would do that. It's like a different behavior that I've depicted. So we have each and every character is different. And as a result, I had many characters in my work. And so having those characters, what they do, how they turn out, that wasn't such a big struggle for me. So you're thinking all these circumstances, then they'll behave in a certain way naturally. Yes, exactly. So you had the series, and so how did you feel when you first got this animation, like adaptation to the movie? Well, I was really surprised, and so even there's manga comics that depict war, and I know that it's difficult, and so even if I do my best to create a good piece of work, it is still a topic that some people may want to turn away from, and Peleliu. I think gradually people started to recognize it, start to know what this work is. So it just spread very slowly. And then so when I received news of the adaptation for the animated film, I was happy, but I knew it was going to be a big struggle. I knew that from the very beginning. So then I think you might have talked to the director in the beginning and you might have tried to make some agreements in the beginning. Yes. Well, this is a comic, a manga, and there were some things I was being careful of in the manga, and I wanted them to be careful of the same things in the film. So that I wanted to share, and I think that, so Peleliu is, it's not about which is the good guys, is the ally or the enemy, because it's more about, so in the story of Peleliu, so there were some things that I was careful of depicting as a story overall, and I said that, like the weapons are weapons that destroy the body, the human body. And I said, we want to depict that in a fair way. Like with animated films, there's like explosion and people are like, being exploded, in regular anime. But here, with the explosion, these are the people that get hurt. And if somebody gets hurt, shot with a bullet, this is how that would affect that person. So that I really wanted to do. Of course, there's regulations around that, but I really wanted them to be very meticulous about those kinds of depictions, about what happens with the weapons. So that should be reality of the war. So that I wanted to share. And Takeda-san, you took part in the screenplay, but of course the story, the manga was long volumes. Wasn't it a big struggle for you for the screenplay? Can you tell me what was difficult? And I think Peleliu, I think most, of course, some people would be have already read the manga, and then it's already been announced about the film adaptation. It's been quite a long time ago when it was first announced, and so coming up with the screenplay was actually the very difficult, and so of course we have to talk about the war, the facts, and then there's the original story, and we want to keep the facts, we want to keep the original story, and it's 2 hours. It should be within 2 hours, and to have a screenplay for that, it's really difficult. And Peleliu, or the battle on Peleliu Island, with the Japanese soldiers and what happened to them, is we said, what are the important places to depict? And we did that. And so we kind of decomposed the original manga story and we reconstructed it. So that's what we did. Okay, yes, thank you. All right. So let me just shift the topic now. So let us see the trailer again. After getting that information, we might see in a different light.
君はこの島から生きて帰れると思っているのかい？
え？田丸一等兵、参りました。
仕事を頼みたいのだ。功績係という。
俺が死んだらおめえがうちの母ちゃんに手紙書くってことか？
楽園が地獄になる。
鬼畜命を打ち通せ
！1万人中わずか34人しか生き残れなかった激戦。その中で生まれたのは、
生きて日本に帰ろうぜ。絶対。
はい。
伏せろ！大丈夫か？
ありがとう。
死ぬのはごめんだぜ。
僕ら約束しただろ。
死ぬわけにはいかねえな。
命はまた巡り合う。儚く散る定めでも夏の果てに
みんなで生きて帰ると信じていた。
ママってお母さん。
約束を忘れない。
たまる！
よしきくん。
ペリリュー、楽園のゲルニカ。
歌い継ぐ命の歌。
Okay, so Takeda Sensei then, hearing Sensei, we liked Sano-san and Hori-san to talk about how you felt. It was the war front as it is in history, and I really appreciate that you depicted it like that, because I've been talking about war and Japanese anime in my classes, and the students, with Ukraine situation, they think that war is more closer to them, and there are more students that want to know more about war, and so that's why. So I'd like to talk about this in my classes. So Hori-san, how about you? I don't know where to start here because so many thoughts in my mind. And I also teach at my university, and we have Tamaru and Yoshiki, the characters. They're young, and they're like as young as my students, And when I was reading the manga, I was really shocked and seeing that they were so young, and it was a shock. But as Takeda Sensei says, they were very courageous. And it's not a melodrama. It was a very, we had really tragic lives, tragic deaths. And it was ordinary people becoming soldiers. They become something else. So becoming a soldier, and it's like a real tragic lives, tragic deaths. And I was really moved with the manga and the comic. And as Takeda-san says, he spoke about weapons destroying the human body. And I thought about that, and I thought that he really put his mind and soul into this work. Yes, thank you. So let's just go back 80 years back. Let's speak about Momotaro, Sacred Sailors. And let me just go over the story just very quickly. So Momotaro, Sacred Sailors. This is directed by Mitsuyo Seo, and he was born in 1911. And in the 1930s, he started to create animated manga films. And this work will be showed on November 2nd with Vanilla Yamazaki's Katsuben. And so 1935, there is Symposia, Chibisuke Monogatari. They're short movies, films that are also created by Seo-san. And if there's something wrong, like something that's deemed not good, the special police would come and arrest you in those days. And then we had Kenzo Masaoka. This person in 1938 created his own studio. And so there was a dilemma in running the business and coming up with films. And then in the 1940s, the studio that the Seo created became Geijutsu no Eigasha. And then so with the request of the Navy, Ministry of Navy, then they created Momotaro Eagles. And then it was really difficult to come up with movies at the time. And so Shochiku, so the Momotaro Seagulls, and then so then the Navy asked Shochiku, and then this is actually the studio was right behind Shochiku at the time. And then so with the Navy, we had the Momotaro Sacred Sailors. And this is based on, this is 74 minutes, and it's Japan's first animation. And so there's actually some very good technology utilized in here. And also, this was produced during the war. And there were several tens of men and women who were in the production, but some had to go to war. And so they only had half the amount of production people on the job. And so therefore, so Momotaro, Sacred Sailor, is really against this background that was very complicated. And Seo, after the war, he said that the Ministry of Navy scolded him that there weren't many courageous scenes in the film. And also there was some, Momotaro, Sacred Soldier. It was kind of like a good storytelling, and then it was Osamu Tezuka, the manga artist, he saw this movie in the theaters in the 1940s, and then he said that this really high quality manga, and it's like the quality of the US. And at the same time, Tezuka said that, there was like all the fields were burned at the same time. So he felt that there was like a gap in what he was seeing on the screen. And so as a historical piece, we would like people to think of it as a historical piece to watch this film. And so I'd like to show you 3 minutes of what the film is about.
That's the opening scene of the film. Now I would like to ask some questions to Hori-san. Hello. I am Hori. Nice to meet you. I have some slides that I have prepared, so I might be looking up there and maybe then to use, but yes. I would like to go through a slide. And this work was produced in 1944. It was completed in December. It went to censorship, and then it was modified and delivered in February. It was released in the next year, April. So when this was released, children had evacuated to rural areas, and there were very limited of numbers of theaters that could screen this. And VHS, do you remember the VHS video format? When I was a university student, it was my first time that I watched this movie in a VHS, and especially emotions of the soldiers going to the battlefront was something that was really even shocking to me. And this work has always been a very important one for me. In the animation history, this has very high quality. It is made in very detailed, meticulous way. That also makes this work very special. And Sano-san is going to talk about this aspect more later. In my point of view, the global film culture was really represented by this work, I think, and also at the battlefront or warfront, depicting the scenes there is always challenge, and that's what I want to talk about as well. Sacred Soldiers is about 4 young soldiers coming back for vacation to their hometowns after military training, and they talk about the great things that they experienced at the training, and they will depart for Indonesia from Japan later, and they will start preparing for the operation of Manado. And there are some goods and letters from their hometown. Also, they receive the messages from their support and their expectation. And there are some accidents of some soldiers dying through the spy aircrafts, but still the story ends in a very positive way, how they are very motivated to make great performance in the war and then come back to their hometown. So that's the story. And the director, Mitsuyo Seo, before working on this Shochiku, as Fujitsu-san introduced earlier, Geijutsu Eigasha is the company where he joined, and they did specialize in documentary films. And Momotaro's Umiwashi was the work that he did and became a mega hit. After this success, he came to the he started working on the Sacred Soldiers. And when he was doing this work on 1944, to give a big context of the situation, the war situation was not positive, actually very desperate when the work was completing. Saipan Island was fallen by that time in July, and the absolute national defense area had been broken. And Peleliu fell in October, and at the same time in New Guinea, because of shortage of food, soldiers were eating humans. So they were really in a desperate situation. That was what this time was about. In this historical situation, the Sacred Soldiers, what was the message the director was trying to convey through the work? And from some quotes of him, we can tell that he was trying to establish a style or a format of Japanese manga, and also he was trying to give birth to a new type or new approach. When watching animation, what kind of expressions did he try to achieve to convey his message? The Sacred Soldiers, this work, covers number 1, Japanese image, number 1, 2, the character design like the American Disney, and number 3, the approach of documentary filming from UK. So these are the 3 topics. You watch the work just now, and that's only the first 2 minutes of the film, but it carries a lot of information already. When it starts, you first see a mountain that connotes Fuji, and then the farmlands are at the skirts, and there are 4 soldiers that are characters. And there is a scene of worshipping a shrine, and also nature, and also the village scenes are also very related to the Japanese identity. Momotaro is a character that appeals later, so this is linked very much to the Japanese traditional fable of battling against the demons, which is linked to the war. And the second point, characters, Disney-like characters, and very smooth emotion with full animation. For example, there are 2 birds at the pond, and it is very similar to the opening scene of Cinderella of Disney, and there are Indonesian animals that make appearance that are depicted in a Disney style. before the war broke out between Japan and America, there was a Disney series called Silly Symphony that was screened in Japan. And also, because of the war, it was not released publicly, but there is the work Fantasia that was the Japanese military did make a special screening of this after it came from Singapore. So this is the context of how the director Seo came to choose this type of expression. Next slide. My third topic, I'm sorry, I know it's hard to read, but it starts with some text, super, and participate in the Menado operation. So there is this description, and this is a documentary declaration that it is recording some facts of that time. Documentary movies in Japan were called culture movies, and that category was growing at that time. There were a lot of new works that were released. Especially, it was wartime, but the British documentary theory was translated into Japan, and it influenced a lot of movie experts, but also general public. This documentary film theory says that social events and other problems ought to be recorded through documentary for general awareness. That's the role of documentary. And also non-professionals to play the roles to deliver the facts. That's what the style is about. So this is a new type of practice of filming, and Geijitsu Eigasha, where Seo belonged to, this was an approach that this company was taking actively. With this background, unique Japanese animation was the ambition, but also his knowledge of films and also his interest in animation was nurtured from a global background. Global influence, and the pictures at the bottom, musical film of America, Disney animation, and then the Chinese Asian first feature film, and other on the world map. You can find the British documentary film, and also avant-garde of Russia and other German approaches. So there are a lot of type of techniques that influence Seo's creation. The novelty of his work and the creativity also has been influenced a lot by this global cultural impact. However, because it was wartime, films, pictures, and newspapers have been repeating a lot of the image of victory. So it was a very closed space created by media mix, the Pearl Harbor attack, and also the paratroops, and also the Percival Yamanaka talk. These were the repeated content. And it's very close to like creating a loop of repeating the same footage. It does distract or avoid people from thinking while giving the people feeling of assurance. But there was active conversation about how Japanese could approach their own unique culture, but there is no pure 100% cultural context of Japan. But bringing out the new creativity to make even stronger work is what he tried to do, and that's where he contributed to the culture building. So for the sacred soldiers depiction of how the soldiers were very brave, I would like to talk about this as well. But the war front had been always a topic that it was difficult to be expressed, because peaceful world had very strong distance with what the things were happening there, and PTSD or trauma did hinder people to actually talk about this topic. And at the home front and also the post-war era, peace and sacrifice and courage have been always the stories that people expected. So the ethics did not accept the real experience of soldiers. And in the post-war time, people were reluctant to understand what really happened. So I went through very quickly, but thank you very much for listening to my presentation. Thank you very much. So the freedom of speech at that time was closed, and there was a gap of what happened actually at the war front. Thank you very much. Now let's move on to Sano-san's presentation. I would like to talk about how this work was pioneering. Next slide, please. So this is a movie magazine, and this is an advertising. So it is says feature-length war chronicle manga movie. So this was the longest work that had been released, 74 minutes. And as Hori-san earlier mentioned, it was a pioneer of animation documentary. So the story is made by 4 pieces. First, the soldiers spending time with their family in Japan. And then the soldiers are spending time with Momotaro on the southern land, which is 38 minutes, which is quite long. And then the operation of Indonesia syllabus is only 18 minutes, but the Allies make unconditional surrender. Japan marks victory. And number 4, children in Japan are cheerfully playing. That's only for 1 minute. So this tells us that the Sacred Soldier's work has very limited depiction of actual war front. The sequence of actual operation is only 1/4. So the daily life scene makes 3/4 of it. The daily life is expressed, even in Japan, even at the southern, in a very friendly tone and manner. This is the scene when they're singing the song of Aiu e O. So this is a part that Tezuka Osamu took care of. This is a very famous scene. It is like a musical. The characters are dancing and singing, and it is a scene of where they study the Japanese alphabets Aiu e O. The peaceful and friendly daily scenes do also are applied with the contrasts. So sometimes the dynamic movement, like a musical style, but also there are more quiet scenes, like a documentary format. So this is a special treatment to make the daily scenes not look too mundane. More contrast techniques are used. For example, the character's movement is sometimes very soft, and this was the ideal for Japan. Japanese Disney style, full smooth movement, but also for the weapons and armories were expressed in a very hard way. Soft and hard, the contrast is a common technique used today in Japan as well. So that's why Seo-san was very pioneer of adapting this technique. Also using this transmitted light was a popular technique after war. In year 41, Ari-chan already, he used this technique, and also in this work, there was a contrast of the light and shadow in and outside of the aircraft.
And with the multi-plane camera, he created dimensional space, and also with the characters close-up, he created flatter space. And so there was contrast even among the spaces that he created. And also, we saw going from higher places to lower places, the characters going inside the river. And Seo-san actually worked under a pen name called Taro Seo. He created a children's storybook called Cheetah-chan. We can see that. So I'm just going to read this. So, seen from a high cliff, Chiro-chan is swept away in the river on a log, and go, go, go. There's a big waterfall making a lot of noise, and they may fall down that waterfall. So Cheetah-chan dives in and rescues Chiro-chan. So that's the same kind of scene we saw in Momotaro Sacred Sailor. And also there's 3 different types of visuals. We have one that's based on silhouette, and this is Kenzo Masaoka. He was the father of animation, and he did that. And also, these are just usually used to be like paper cut dolls on the film, but actually he depicted right on the cells. So creating silhouette like visuals. And also there was things that were more manga, and there was things that were more of that things were graphical. So, and there was a musical element. There was also a documentary element. So at the time, this was a very experimental effort. And also in Sacred Sailor, there's different images, and so they made sure that the audience wouldn't be getting confused. So they had, like with the conversation, they had switchover editing between Momotaro and the enemy. It was switching from back and forth between the 2 characters. And so that was a general method that they used. And so with that conversational method, then we saw that that the image also it was made so that the story is easily understood. And also, so the Sacred Sailor is a very creative piece of work. And so where did that creativity come from? And the background would be that, well, back in those days, people thought that Japanese anime is inferior to American anime, and so creating something like a Disney film is what was being asked of Japanese animators. And but of course, not just copying American anime. It would be creating a proprietary creative work for Japan, and with adopting the latest technologies. They were able to combine different technologies that are different from the U.S. to come up with something very creative. And also at the end, so this is a depiction of death in the front lines. So in the paratrooper sequence, it was the first time in Japanese anime that a real death came up on the screen. We saw the sword go into the enemy's body, which was a very direct depiction of death. And we also heard that one of the Japanese soldiers was dead. So we had that indirect depiction as well. So therefore, and then the reason why they had this depiction of death is because they wanted reality. And also this was like Ko Dansha's children picture books also had some very, very graphical depictions of war. So that was the background. And so war. So how would that be depicted by the media? How would that be accepted by people? And of course, people see films in different ways. Like, for example, Osamu Tezuka, he saw Sacred Sailor in April of 1945. And, like all around the cinema, there was nothing. And so it was like a bunch of burnt fields. So there was such a big contrast. And he felt like this was like, among the burnt ruins, he felt like this was like a kind of like a lie. And he actually said he was moved by something else. He was amazed at the quality of the animation of Japanese people, and that we weren't inferior to the American animation anymore. That was why he was amazed. So people see this film in different ways, depending on different times. And so I think that what we can say for Peleliu as well. So going to the next page. So this is the last slide. So So how do we leverage, make use of testimonials and facts and papers by people who experienced the war? So I think, and you have referred to a lot of facts by people who experienced the battles in Peleliu. So Hori-san and I came up with a book called Senso to Nihon Anime, War in Japanese Anime. And Yasushi Watanabe, so this is, so there was actually another book that was written when this person had seen the film when he was 9 years old, and we have those his papers written in this book as well. And Watanabe-san, he actually had was exchanges with director Seo, and he has written some books, literature on director Seo. So thank you very much. All right, thank you. Okay, so diverse expressions were in the film, and but of course, accepting how the film is received is depends on the audience. Okay, so thank you. Now, lastly, I'd like to talk about what the kind of like history of what happened in Japanese anime, well, commercial anime from 1945 onwards. So this is Asia Pacific War stories in Japanese war anime. So there is a historian that talked about how we can segment these years. So he makes segmentations like this. So 1931 to 1945, this is the era of circumstances. This is actually when the war is still going on. And also Momotaro, Sacred Soldier, also Momotaro, the Sea Eagles, that's, those are the films that came out. And also from 1945 to 1965, this is more about the era of experience. So that's how Narita-san names this. And these are people who experienced the war. They're talking about the war together. So the premise is that they had a lot of struggles during the war. And so that was a time when they were talking about the war between 1945 to 1965, so 20 years. And then in the next category, 1965 to 1990, this is more and more people have not experienced the war. So this is the time when people who experienced the war talks about the war to people who haven't experienced the war. And then from 1990 and onwards, this is all kinds of conversations about the war is now more a collective memory. And this is not by the individual. This is more about collectiveness, like it might be by the country, or it might be the group that you may belong to. So this is so war is being talked about in those collective memories. So we have these 4 types of generations, and Japanese anime, I think we can place them during these years. And also, so in the age of circumstance, there's a few works. So 1945 to 1965 experience. This is the post-war animation started to rise after 1965. And so that's why we don't see a lot of work here. But on the other end, boys' magazines, there were like war stories, like there was a boom taking place. And from the 1950s, and then in the 1960s, so this was more about showing the attractiveness of the weapons, like Space Battleship Yamato and Zero Sen Hayato. So it was about weapon versus weapon that was being depicted here. And also, and there was focus on morality too. So it's kind of like focusing more on the people and how they were acting. And so this is so one of the things. So there was some papers on this too, and so the manga. So Zero Sen Hayato came up in 1964, and at the time, the enemy. Well, it didn't really say that the enemy was the Allied forces, though. And also after that, in 1968 to 1990, this is the era of kind of like testimonials. And in TV broadcasting, there were some work that, well, the war wasn't featured so largely in pieces of work, but just in some episodes. Like, for example, so 1968, Star of the Giants. That was a baseball manga, baseball anime. And every year, around summertime, or maybe it was not even summertime in some place. So there would always be some kind of original episode that's themed around the war. So the 91st episode was the honored pitching. And this is Sawamura Eiji Monogatari. So this was an episode about Babe Ruth and famous pitchers who died in the war, too. And that was in the episode. And the protagonist's father, Hoshi Hyuma's father, was also in the military, and he wasn't able to become a baseball player because of that. So that's why. So they had some memories of the war in a baseball story, baseball program. So. And a lot of the screenwriters, they were like what we call the shokokumin people, the younger citizens. And so they were on the home front. They experienced all the air raids. They had experienced a lot of lack of food, but they haven't gone to the war front because they were too small. So we had people like that appearing in these programs. And so also a war story, Animentary, The Decision. This is also a depiction of the war. And so this talks about the decision of the commanders. And this is another war story. And also in the 1970s, so the shokokumin said, well, the younger citizens, so they started to offer children's literature and fiction talking about, and also nonfiction, about the Pacific War to, but they had film adaptations later, like, for example, The Glass Rabbit, that was about the air raids, and also Taiyo no Ko, Gift of Fire. This is the battle in Okinawa. The father gets PTSD, and so that was children's literature, which was not animated. And also another, some representatives would be 1976. This was Barefoot Gen. And also in 82, we have Tsushima Maru, Sayonara Okinawa. So this is a story where people in Okinawa, they were getting attacked, and then Tsushima Maru had drowned. So, and also one called Raining Fire, talking about the air raids in Fukuoka. So and so they're actually what we call the shokokumin Sedai, the younger citizens.
So they are slightly different from commercial animation, but Renso Kinoshita, an independent creator, also announced his work Picadon, Atomic Bomb, that was well received as well globally. So this was a turning point because we start to see less of these work, but the rising generation type of approach had some really unique strength, but also some challenges. War experience is an experience, complex experience with different elements. And by making it to a story, there are some elements that cannot be carried on. But also, because it's cannot fully cover all the complex details, but because it has become more like narrative, it is more emotional, like cool or admiration. Those kind of storylines are easier to for people to spread among people, and also because animation was more for children, targeted for children, the social aspect was not really covered in the stories or the expressions. So the political side were not covered, meaning that the war were positioned more like natural disasters, that's something that suddenly happened. In the 90s and onwards, more of the era, now this the era of remembrance, of memory, and entertainment work started to feature Asia-Pacific war elements. But now, I think there is another new phase of trying to convey about the wars. So for example, Hayao Miyazawa's The Wind Rises. This is a fictional story of the developers creating fighting aircrafts. And also another work in 2016. This is a work called The End of the World. This is about a woman that was living in Kure from around 1943 and around that area. And movie of Toto-chan, The Little Girl at the Window. This was a bestseller novel, or actually a story that was animated. But during the war, until actually pre to post-war, the lifestyle of people, the daily lives of people started to see more war elements, and that was depicted in this movie in a very cinematic style. And in the same year, in 2023, The Birth of Kitaro, The Mystery of Gegege. This is, of course, a creation we all know about the manga artist Mizuki Shigeru. And this is a prequel of Kitaro. And it took place at the post-war time. One of the characters returned alive after being commanded to do suicidal attack, and it was based on a story that was released, work that was released in early 70s. So 90% of the story is based on fact, according to the comic artist Mizuki. So there was this illusionary suicidal attack thing. So there were some soldiers that you are supposed to have committed suicidal attack. So you have to go again to commit it. So these are the elements that were woven into the story to show how the wartime and post-war are connected. So it went very quickly, but that was an overview of the different stories related to war. When the approach gets closer to more true-to-life type approach, it starts to focus more on the home front. And it is very rare to see stories that are capturing the war front. And post-war Japan has this kind of characteristic, I think. Many people's experience, when they talk about the experience of the war, it was how they were devastated by the war. And it's not about like the battlefield. And Hori-san already talked about it. But because the war front is consisted of very complex element and combination, it was really hard to express that scene or the facts in a story. So thanks very much. That was my summary. So now I would like to open it for a bit more discussion with the panelists. So how can we talk about war in a fictional approach? But I know it's difficult, but unless we take on the challenge, there's no breakthrough. So Takeda-san, Momotaro Sacred Soldiers, have you watched the work? Because I received the offer for this panel discussion, I watched it for the first time. Animation at that time is not my expertise. So how much this work was great. Of course, I know that it was amazing work, But when I was a kid, I watched a lot of animation. And compared to the work that I have watched by myself, I think the quality is at an equal level. So I'm very surprised that right after the war, this kind of quality of animation was achieved. Next question is for Hori-san. How can we express war in fiction? I know it's a very delicate topic. What is your point of view? When I read your manga, Takeda-san, I really felt the strength of fiction. I was deeply moved and impressed. I think if it's a documentary format or style, as we discussed a bit earlier, the actual the information or the facts that came out from the interviewees, we have to be considerate. And of course, we cannot convey straightly or directly whatever we heard. And of course, that has strength, but also stories or narratives or fictions also have a different power to get really close to the fact as well. It's not just simple heroism. Every story ending at a happy end. Stories that don't end with a happy end can be much stronger, I felt. How about you? Yes, thank you very much. I echo on what I just heard. So Mizuki Shigeru's work that we discussed about, so 90% is based on fact, he said, but 10% is fiction. And in the afternote in the manga, 2 of the suicidal attacks, the second one is fiction. That's what the manga artist said, Mizuki said. And why did he do that? Because he had a message that he wanted to convey. He used the power of fiction. That's why I think. Fiction versus real. The percentages or the breakdown could differ by the creator, but it is always about the creator's message that they want to convey. They choose the right format, and if they need fiction, they use it. Takeda-san, now I have a question for you. Peleliu, the lead character, Tamaru, is the person was in charge to create the records of the great achievements of the soldiers who passed away. And I think that role that was given to him is very amazing because the person in the fiction platform, the person playing the role there is also doing work of creating something that could be a fiction. What do you think? When I started to do this work, the first thing that I thought about, and I had to remind myself, is that I know nothing about the war because I don't have first-hand experience. But before I started to do this creation of war manga, the war is something of the people who actually experienced it. And there are a lot of works, for example, the famous work by Mizuki. And they have a lot of great works already before me, of course. And now myself, who does not know the war, what kind of work should I create, I thought. The people who experienced the war are owned by them, the experiences are owned by them, and that's why it has very strong reality. But because I haven't experienced directly, I think I have a different aspect or perspective. I have more objectiveness, I thought. I learned here that Ryuichi Narita, the historian, said that from 1990s, it is the era of memory. And the collective memory has become the topic. And I didn't know these categories of different eras. So this is something I learned. But this is very similar to what I try to achieve with my work, Peleliu. Because there are a lot of people who experience the war, and I was also thinking their experiences or memories could become something like a collection. It could be a collective information, I thought. different experience of serving at different war fronts. They have records of their experience, and when I read of those things, they might have served at different locations, but they had something in common that they shared, I felt. And collecting that feelings or memories could bring objectiveness, I thought. So the role or the responsibility of the protagonist was to keep records of the other soldiers, and when a soldier passes away in their troop, maybe he just fell over and he lost his life, even if it was like a simple way that he did. He had to tell the message to the family members waiting at homeland that he died as a real hero, so with like great performance, and that's a fictional thing, the message. And I learned that these were facts, these were things that really happening. Us as a generation who do not know war firsthand, when we learn about the war, we always have to be conscious about these things that really happened. There were fictional messages sent to the family members at hometown. If you just read the letters that the family members received, it is all about like how heroic the soldier was, their family member was. But in the background, making that fictional story of how they were a hero, is that a good thing or not? We don't know, but there was an aspect of fiction. That's what we have to know about. So I thought I have to make that statement at the beginning of the work that it is me creating this work who did not have war experience myself, but I am doing this work. Thank you, Takeda-san, for sharing your comment. I know the post-war experience is very complex. It's not just perilous, it's not just hard and tough. Those words are not enough to express the experiences that people had, but how should we convey this through a fictional approach? Hori-san, for example, what do you think? Documentary movies are not necessarily non-fiction because how they're directed, how they're treated, they can be different, yes. But also when you try to create a fiction, documents or records, and also, fortunately, up to our generation, had direct access to talk with the people who came back from the war or who lived at that time. But some people are not willing to talk about what they experienced because it's too hard. By collecting all of the facts and digesting it, that process, if the fictional work does not go through that process, it will create a different impression, I think. And I think the original work has great strength because the Japanese soldiers and American soldiers had interaction, had contact. And usually in that kind of scene, Japanese soldiers are the hostage, but they treated well. That's the kind of typical story. But Takeda-san, your story was about the American soldier. So war front is a place where many different people were there. So through the documentary approach, the process of coming back to the real fact is really important, I felt.
So there's fiction and nonfiction, and you have to see it from kind of like a bird's eye view. So Sano-san, do you have any thoughts on that? Fiction, difficulty of fiction and distance in nonfiction. Distance. I would think, as Hori-san says, all films are, most of them are fiction. And when we see them as viewers, we we're not like, oh, it's great because it's fiction or it's great because it's nonfiction. Whatever is, pulls us into the film is good. So Peleliu, I would like a lot of people to see that piece of work. And it's about friendship too. And even small children to the elderly, I think everybody can relate to that kind of setting and theme. And that's why I think the work is so amazing. Okay, so I'd like to ask Sano-san. So you said that how to create a distance with, the people seeing fiction. And I know there isn't an answer here, but so fiction with war, how we perceive that kind of film, like what do you think is ideal? Like how should we deal with these types of work? That's a very difficult question. No, I'm sorry. So when I look at the students, I think people who are really interested, they're really interested. So I think something that answers the curiosities and interests of people, I think that's the work that should do. Oh, so it's kind of like a work that lets us question and also, dealing with fiction. So it's all about how we can create those questions, I guess. Yes, I think that's important. And I think, everybody is, thinking about that. Okay, so Takeda-san. So a complicated experience. So you had an ensemble cast, to talk about those different elements. So in the film, I think for the film, you had to organize all these different people. Yeah, because as the creator of the original story, so now this is becoming a screenplay in the framework of 2 hours. And so I think, what we have is the best way. But there are some episodes in the real story that was not depicted. And, it was a big dilemma. And so there are some episodes that we had to shave off of from the original story, but still the framework or the structure of Peleliu, the original story, is still there in the film. Okay, thank you. I think we're approaching closing time, but in summary of our talk today, so Momotaro, Sacred Sailor, and up until Peleliu, there was about 80 years have gone by between the two works. So what is this film about? I'm sure that people have questions, and so there should be some kind of discovery when people see these films, and so the audience should always have some sort of question, which would make the films look more new, or some old films can get rediscovered that way. So I think, all kinds of works have been created, but in order to go forward, audiences, questioning becomes important. And then there's diversity. I think Takeda-san, you said iro diversity, and so that is also important. So I think I would summarize our talk today here. So thank you so much. And now I'd like to open the floor for questions. Just one person for one question. So if you can raise your hands. Okay. The woman in the front row. Yes, thank you. Momotaro, Sacred Sailors is a film that I don't really see. Oh, and also the Sea Eagles too is something that I haven't seen. But and I haven't read the manga Peleliu yet, so I might be going off the track here. But So at the Kyoto International Manga Museum, there's manga and war exhibition going on right now, and I was seeing that exhibition, and they talked about war manga. The problem is that there are similarities there, and my profession is manga, and I think the film industry has the same kind of issue. So you went out of your way, to get all these experts here. So that's why I'd like to hear your point of view on that. Okay, so maybe we can start from Hori-san to answer the question. So you're saying kind of similarities? Is that your question? So that is actually a very interesting way to see everything. I did go to the Kyoto Manga Museum this summer, and in Japan, yes, I think there's a pattern on how Japanese people depict war, and I'm just going to go very quickly here since we don't have time. But one is, after the war, there is the 7 years of occupation by the U.S., and then war crimes, I think, started to get depicted from there. And anyway, yes, if we can go to be the next person to talk about this similarity or typology.
I do understand that there is some patternization because the work has to sell, but also uniqueness is something also that all the creators try to dial up. And I believe in that power there. And by paying attention to the different uniquenesses, we can save the different works from getting standardized. I think you're exactly right. Because, for example, in Peleliu as well, commercially, friendship at wartime is the main theme. However, because commercially that's where the majority of the audiences exist. That's the entry point. And what is there more to express? And I think that's where the uniqueness of the difference of each work can shine. May I also add a comment? In my perspective, how they can be standardized or patternized, I think by categorizing the different work, there are more discoveries. Because creativity always has the power to go beyond and outside. What is the story trying to tell? Where is the story trying to take you? For example, the special operational team and also the sci-fi, like, for example, Yamato. These are different formats and expressions, but they're very similar, common themes. There is a common image that maybe the both creators were reflecting there in the same generation. So understanding like a common pattern of different works can give us more discovery and insight as well, I think. I'm sorry, we could take only the time. Limited time could allow us to take 2 questions. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much, everyone.